This is the Philosophy of Criticism, Part 2. I want to remind you, don't take anything I say on trust. Don't take my word for it. You should think about it for yourself. So last time we were looking at different types of criticism. Now we're going to continue with that. So you can criticize something because it doesn't solve a problem that it's supposed to. So in general, in a very broad way, arguments are always trying to address some sort of question or some problem. We do philosophy for some purpose. There's always some sort of goal or something. So if an argument hasn't got a purpose, that's a problem with it. Arguments should always explain what their point is. And if an argument does have a point, but it doesn't achieve it, then it failed. That's a good criticism of it. Some arguments contain unnecessary parts. The unnecessary parts shouldn't really be there. It's a flaw to have them. If you could take something away from the argument and it would still work just as well, then you should take it away. Sometimes people try to add unnecessary parts because they want that part to be there. For example, I might say, all balls are red and God exists, therefore this ball is red. That's a really bad way to sneak in the claim that God exists, because it doesn't really have anything to do with the red balls that we were talking about. It's just throwing something in there unnecessarily. Some arguments are easy to vary. That means you can change them, and they still solve the same problem they were solving before, and they do an equally good job of it, even though you changed part of it. So that means part of the argument wasn't really important. You can change it, it still works just as well. So that can happen if part of the argument is unnecessary, because then you could change it to absolutely anything, and it wouldn't really matter. It also works if part of the argument is arbitrary. If you put something completely arbitrary into an argument, then it's going to be easy to change it around. And it's not a very good argument. In a good argument, there's always some reason for every part to be there and be the way it is. There's some specific purpose everything is serving. So if you see an argument that's easy to change around and it still works just as well, that's a problem with the argument. The argument should be made more adapted to the problem it's solving. Some arguments have bad explanations. There isn't really a standard example of this. There can be all types of problems. But the basic thing is arguments need to make sense, and if you see a problem with it or a flaw in it, then you can criticize that. Some arguments, though, have no explanation, which is a definite problem. An example is appeals to authority. Those ask you to accept the conclusion because of authority, but they don't give a good explanation for why it would be true. As an example, suppose I said, all balls are red because the Pope said so. You can see that there's no explanation of why all balls are red. It doesn't even try. So remember, good arguments should explain themselves to your satisfaction. If they don't, point out, it could be better, it could have a better explanation. That's a good criticism of it. Whenever you're not satisfied, there's room for improvement. So we've gone over a list of types of criticism, but it's not a complete list. It's also not very important what we named the different types of criticism. You don't have to worry about categories of criticism. You don't have to worry about titles for things. What you really want to do is find a problem with something and explain what the problem is, and that's a good criticism of it. You should try to make your criticism easy to understand, really clear, and persuasive. And you don't have to worry about any sort of formal thing. You don't have to worry about naming your criticisms. I was just using that as a way to organize things and to give you a taste of different types of criticism. Some people want a simple way or a foolproof way to judge arguments, but there isn't one. Basically, they're looking for a way that they don't have to think. They don't have to make judgment calls. They want a mechanical argument that doesn't use. They want a mechanical approach that doesn't use creativity. But judging arguments doesn't work like that. And criticism doesn't work like that. You always have to think about it. Philosophy always involves judgment calls. It always involves thinking things through and forming your own opinions. And that's not a bad thing. There's never going to be a completely foolproof way to do philosophy. But just do your best and then try to improve on that.